Hey, and welcome to Beamstream. So welcome to the first guest podcast where it involves, finally another developer apart from myself. So featuring today, we have Wiley slash James. Say hello.
No, thanks for having me on. It's pretty much an honor, to be honest. I was just saying to be, the maiden voyage. Just need a bottle of champagne to be smashed on the side of me now.
Yep, indeed. So start things off, I'm genuinely curious about people's journeys, and this is exactly what this podcast is about. It's really learning about other people other than myself. So Wiley, just to kind of start off, what is your educational background before you got into programming in general?
Pretty much zilch. I've got some GCSEs. I did okay in my GCSEs, but I am a school dropout.
Cool.
I dropped out due to my AS levels. Got no kind of formal training in IT. I think so. All self-taught, essentially.
That's pretty interesting. So I guess when it comes to, I guess this pretty much, dives deep into your professional background. So I assume your professional background started almost right after GCSEs. Is that correct? Or
I got into HTML when I was like, must have been like 12 or 13, something like that. I don't remember exactly when, but somebody bought me a book. My stepmom bought me a book. I think it was like build a website in a weekend. Um, my old man, he was building a bungalow in West Wales, a rural. It's just completely rural in no middle of nowhere. I was just bored stiff all the time. Just bored stiff, breaking things, just walking around, just fiddling with things and this, that, and the other. So I think they just thought we keep him busy, and they gave me this book website in a weekend. But the stupid thing about it is, it didn't. We didn't even have a computer. It's
that's
ridiculous.
interesting.
Didn't even have a computer, and but I was reading this book, and I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. I didn't really know how things rendered this, that, and the other on the internet. It was all quite very new. That's when people were still using like Yahoo search and stuff.
Oh
That was like
boy. Yeah.
search engine, and well, basically, I just thought, like, how do I go about writing this stuff? Okay, so this sounds crazy, but I got a pencil and paper, and I started writing script, HTML, with pencil. And it's a joke, really, but I was thinking about it earlier. If I had a bug, I'd simply rub it out with a rubber.
Wow, you
It's the
started
OG
white
bug fix. Who needs Git, you know?
you started whiteboarding before it was cool, I guess.
Yes, it's mad, really. But a couple of years later, my old man got a computer for his business for email. But this is before computers had Wi-Fi and stuff like that. Wi-Fi was amazing when it came out. Like, whoa, it's wireless. But he thought, oh, better get onto the email. When somebody says the email, stuff like that. And I thought, right, I better convince him he needs a website because I got an excuse to get on that computer, and that's kind of where it started. And I was like 12 or 13, somewhere around there. So essentially, that's the source of everything, really, in terms of my career.
Oh, that's interesting. So I guess you already dabbled into programming way before, formal education itself. And so from that point where you built the first website, um, did you already know what you wanted to do from that point, regardless of your GCSEs or?
No, it's completely just. I'm more of a like I float around kind of thing. Back then, I was, you know, I just didn't like academia really. I wouldn't say I disliked it, but I wouldn't say it was like my forte. Even though like, I still got like decent results or whatever, I just wasn't my environment. I was more of a tinkerer. Just that's just my nature.
Yeah, like you learn more by doing rather than being taught this is the way theoretically, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that kind of has some downsides as well if you think about it, because you sometimes take some unorthodox like routes down certain, you go down certain avenues where by maybe some kind of syllabus in some way, shape, or form could have guided you. You do
Right.
waste a lot of time getting to the same result in
Yeah.
some aspects.
Yeah. So I guess now I'm really curious. So take us through, finishing your better part of formal education from GCSEs. From that point, what was that journey like all the way to where you are right now?
Well, so I finished my GCSEs. It was great. Got through those, no problem. But I kind of like I even went off the HTML and the scripting. I wouldn't call it programming as such. It's more like just a markup language. So didn't really have much logic. I mean, I skipped at the time. It was Perl programming. I remember looking at that and going, that looks pretty heavy. I'll give that a miss, because I'm more of a use case first, and I'll learn what will kind of fulfill the specifications, right? So I got my old man's website running, great, did the job. But like for a couple of years, I kind of just floated around, got into music, chasing girls mostly. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
so you did the teenage thing of have a mad one, and I think I was just given an insane amount of freedom to do what I wanted. It was a very strange way to parent, but hopefully it's worked out okay. I'm not a psychopath yet, anyway. So, but yeah, so I kind of floated around. I joined a band, this and the other, and just school just didn't interest me. So I dropped out just after completing my AS level, and that was the end of that journey. Got into music, this, that, and the other, and then worked in a stock room, worked in retail for like 2 years or something, 2 or 3 years. Um, but it just didn't do it for me. Like everything, I just was a bit lost, as a floating around. So yeah, I got to a point where the manager, because this is a recession now, so like companies are really, they use that to their advantage and pretty much put in their foot to your throat. And they got to the point at the end of the year, and the manager was like, "Oh, by the way, you got to work Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and Boxing Day, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day, or didn't say it, or you're fired, basically." And I
Right.
said, "You know what? You can stick it." And I just handed the notice in, as you do.
Yeah.
Um, but by this point, I'd already started to dabble with coding again. This is like 2008, would have been 2008, 2009, something like that. Um, and my old man, unfortunately, passed away a year prior. He was on a building site, he was working, and he had a heart attack. He's 61, but I just thought in my head it kind of triggered something. I was like, do I want to be like that? That is not, I don't want to go that way. So it just kind of stuck a rocket up the backside, really. And I just started looking into things, thought, I could probably move back into this space, right? Because it did interest me. I like building things. And YouTube was in its infancy, but it was like mature enough to have a couple of tutorials on there. PHP tutorials are like massive at that time. It was probably the main kind of bulk of the tutorials. So I just started watching these tutorials, and I thought, kind of makes sense. Um, so yeah, I started coding. I quit my job, and I thought, right, there's no money coming in, but I was living with my parents, so it's pretty cool, right? So I was living with my stepdad and my mum. They pretty much paid for me to bum around the house all day and just learn, just look at the computer all day and night. And yeah, so I just picked this PHP up and thought, wow, there's a million things I can build with it. There's I like this. It's limitless. And as I kind of said before, I mentioned I'm kind of utility first, and then the use case comes first as a primary, and secondary is learning to fulfill the use case. Whereas this was kind of role reversed. And then, whoa, my mind just completely exploded with ideas. And then I was like, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, da, 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 da. And I just came up with all these different projects, which like accelerated that kind of learning process. So from then on, I thought, right, I'm getting tight on money now. What can I do? I don't really have massive amount of experience. I can't like, I'm not going to get a job on that. I've got no formal education. I can't just go, oh, I'll just join this uni course, or anything like that. So I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to join. Do you know peopleperhour.com?
I do.
It's like freelancer. It's similar to freelancer.com, but it's like more. I'd say it's more European. Um, and back then it was kind of new, but kind of like it was a new paradigm in a way. And so I'll join this. And the best thing I could do right now is put myself out there, say I can build X, Y, and Z. And if I get any clients, awesome, because I'm in the deep end. The best thing you can do is to put yourself under pressure, right? Like a lot of people run from that. The best thing you can actually do is to jump in the deep end because you literally got to get out, right? So, or you're going to drown. And so that puts that pressure on you. Pressure sometimes is good. Um, so I did that, and within 2 or 3 years, I was like number four, like in terms of like the highest grossing freelancers. I was like number four out of like 30, 40,000 people, which
What?
is it's insane, right? So, but it just forced me to learn all these different things because clients would be like, "I need this," and I'd be like, "Okay, well, I'll find out how to do that." And I would look around, like say it was JavaScript based or jQuery based. Then I look, and then I know jQuery, but I kind of did it on the job, which is it's pretty mad, really. But with all that pressure, it's crazy how your brain can adapt to that. And like under high pressure, it'll soak it up, especially if you're interested, of course, as well. But we're talking JavaScript when it's jQuery and animations where like it wasn't CSS and it was quite janky. But at the time, everyone just wanted jQuery, didn't they? So it was just things like that, and then it got to, well, I want this. I want to be able to store customer data. All right, that's my SQL, and you've got your SQL on top of it. So all these things kind of layered upon each other, and it was a situation where I could only really go down the full stack route because I needed to build full solutions.
Yeah.
So that was of massive benefit to me, definitely, with the people per hour. So that's pretty much the start of professional career.
Right. Right. That is quite a journey. I mean, it also sounds like, you've been through a lot of personal experiences as well. And that's pretty much also been the factor that's driven you to where you are right now, I guess, right? Um,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
Because it's kind of it was not just curiosity or you know that kind of I didn't have that thirst to learn in a way. It was more necessity as well.
right. Like it
It was
actually gave you a sense of urgency to kind of do something in your life for the most part.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was, and not only that, like money was tight. It's definitely tight in the household. So not that I contributed that much, but like where I'm from, like in South Wales with the valleys, it's insanely deprived. And if you like, most of my friends or like people I knew at the time are still there, and you just don't make it out with it.
Mm,
There's not many opportunities and stuff. So it's like in the 90th percentile most deprived place
I see.
in the
Yeah.
UK. So, I think I found this insane sweet spot, but I found it by accident. It's accidental, right? Because it's kind of like as tech is constantly moving, um, there's not much of a syllabus around like this space. So there's a lot of opportunities for those that aren't really formally educated, and that was I just fell into it, just so fortunate, really.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very impressive track record. In terms of like So how old were you when you started, getting into programming once again? You've revisited it, you learned for a few years. How old were you at that point? And then how old were you when you actually landed your first client, if you remember at all?
So I remember I started the PHP journey. I think it was 2008. I was must be 18 then. So it's been November. It's November 2008. I started dabbling in PHP and just building my own project. By December, I had travelled to Rye in England to meet the first client.
Oh,
So
damn. Okay.
it was literally a month.
So you
Uh,
literally grinded it out for about a month just purely through YouTube resources, and then just straight away just try to land a client.
yeah, so there's this guy, Adam from, I don't know whether you've heard of it, it's at developphp.com. But he was very like dominant in the space. He had a whole business model around it.
Right,
And
right.
he ran forums and all these, yeah, loads of resources. Awesome guy. He's kind of dropped back a bit now, but I pretty much learned the bulk of it from him. But yeah, I just thought, look, I could probably start bringing in things. I could, if I kind of was upfront about it. I had like got a portfolio, so I was like publishing my projects in the portfolio. Surely this is a skill that can be sold, right? And I can also pick up things along the way. So I just got straight onto it. Really,
Wow, that's that sounds crazy. I think,
it's mad, isn't it? Really, I
yeah, I
think I was
mean,
crazy at the time. Really. I think I'm crazy. That's what it is.
no, I mean it's not crazy. It's impressive stuff. I mean, when I was your age, I just went straight into full-time, development, I guess, just through, the classic routes of full-time jobs. But, you had a lot of risk on your side, which clearly paid off at this point, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's really cool. So I mean, so that's your professional journey so far. In terms of the types of roles you've picked up, what kind of roles did you go through? Because you mentioned that, you went through a lot of full stack solutions, like you had to be full stack. But was there any sort of, was it a process of, for this contract, I'm going to get a front end, for this contract, it's back end, but then for this other one, it's a full solution, and for this other one, I'm a manager or something higher. Did you get
Yeah,
anything like that?
yeah, absolutely. It was literally a different. Well, I'd say there was like more of a split. So you're talking like 80-20, something like that. So 80% of the clients wanted just the whole turnkey solution, and that's what I was offering. I was offering turnkey solutions because I knew that's what people wanted. They want something. They just want a straightforward process where everything's efficiently communicated and kind of carried out, right? So a lot of people are kind of patient with that as well and understanding. Uh, so they essentially, I put myself like in the turnkey solution category, um, but then you had like the other 20% who had like even proprietary solutions. So I worked like with this educational like company. It was like they did a lot of stuff for like the BBC. So like those slides that you get on the BBC that kind of educates you about certain areas. And it was like a kind of a very primitive form of that back in the day. And I was working on that system to create slides, this, that, and the other. So you had more like kind of a niche project. But I wouldn't say in the early years that I was weighted, if that makes sense. It was more of a right, full stack, we need this solution. Can you do it? Basically, that's what it was for 80% of the clients. And obviously, as time went on, things developed as I started actually contracting. So for bigger clients, then they have bigger teams, they have different kind of stacks. You've got stacks. So I was working on greenfield projects at first. Then I started working on like stuff that you needed to kind of learn the stack that they were running, all the existing code. It didn't matter how messy it was. You got to go in there and just pick it up and go really. So yeah, it was a learning experience because I went from being solo to then working with other people, which is completely alien to me. And you always get this thing. I always speak to devs and they go like, "Oh, I don't publish this, that, and the other. They might see my code." And it's like, what you like? They're scared of being judged, right? And you can kind of understand that mentality if you're like a self-taught developer, because you're just used to your code, this and that. You haven't got any feedback, and yeah, I kind of went through those motions, but then realized actually, you know, it's not that scary because people are very pragmatic in this space.
Yeah, I think criticism when it comes to, quality of code is it's an initial shock as someone new, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember raising my first PR and I got over 30 comments and I was like, yeah, I don't know anything at all. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you said, you go through the motions, you get better every time and yeah. But in terms of the roles that you played in, so like you worked with other developers going into an existing team, for example, like what were the characters like? Was there any sort of well, I would say any issues, any problems, because obviously you're from the outside looking in rather than the inside, right? How
Yeah.
was that like? Was there a sense of differentiation or because you're a contractor there, right? Was there any problems with that at all or?
Well, on the whole, no. A lot of like, for example, I think with the turnkey kind of solution, I was working in companies and as allocated projects with some, you know, in some cases, I was actually allocated the entire project, and then I'd be managed by like the C-level team or something like that, you know. So the very small companies, like startups, I've kind of worked with mostly startups, you know. So except for a, a select few, I've had completely different experiences. It's very. I'll give you that juxtaposition in a minute, but with the kind of the startup scene, it's all very small and agile. So they would. What I kind of figured out is these companies would just have separate developers working on mostly full stack, working on these projects whilst they kind of were more in the marketing department. And that's kind of what I was used to until I started getting into these kind of bigger contracts with bigger teams, bigger companies, etc. And actually, with one of the bigger companies that I work with, I remember just the onboarding once. I said, "Oh yeah, you know, come in, join on Monday now, join the Slack, and we'll get you all sorted out." And I just remember just somebody copying and pasting, just copy pasting or sending a PDF over and going, "Oh, this is what it is." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Well, give me a shout if you need anything." And I was like, "Right, okay, that sounds good." So I was looking through this thing, and then I'd contact members of this Slack group, and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm not sure. This, that, and the other." I find the bigger the team, the less cohesive. But I think everyone knew what they were doing, but like after 2 or 3 months. So it just took a long time to get the answers, and everyone seemed to pass it off to everyone else. That's kind of my observation. But I don't know whether that's the case in everything, but that's kind of what I observed in these bigger teams was the communication breakdowns are massive. And there's Chinese whispers as well. Like one person might think something, but the originator might have said another thing, but it's just spread around the Slack group. And then you've got this piece of information and you're working off false information. So yeah, you know, all these tools like Slack, this and that, they've done a lot to improve communication, but they're still not there yet. I think there's a lot of room to grow in that space because I still don't think it's very organized for bigger corporations, you know?
So sounds like you much prefer the onboarding processes from a lot smaller companies. Is that's the feel that I'm gathering right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with startups because it's not just it's more of a journey, right? You're not just a cog in the machine. And I find that everyone's way more engaged. That makes sense. But that's just my own personal, you know, journey. I'm sure things have since I kind of the last time I've worked in that environment, I'm sure there's processes that have come along to improve this, that, and the other. But Yeah, that's just my own journey. Maybe nobody wanted to approach me, but I don't know.
Uh, no, I'm sure it's not you, it's me. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
not about it's a feature.
yeah. So, I mean, have you ever got the chance to work somewhere? I mean, you mentioned 80/20, right? What kind of roles did you work in with the 20%? Uh,
So it would mostly be like just like I've worked in every role probably, like junior dev. Um, worked in junior dev, and as things grew, I actually reached like lead dev positions. A company contacted me. They needed to rebuild this. Basically, it's like a job aggregator, right? So they were. It's pretty big at this time, but they wanted to grow, and they took me on for a certain time, every month, contracting me a few hours to kind of keep the platform ticking over until they came up with a strategy. And once the strategy kicked in, I was on with them full time. I pretty much had to dump all the other clients, all the other obligations, but obviously it was quite rewarding. It was a great contract, and I rebuilt that system from scratch, single handedly, right? So the whole thing, we had to build three sites. We had to have a lot of stuff. So a lot of the I think a lot of the planning is very. Um, I think a lot of in terms of like coding, everything's I'll just build this system. Is a lot of forward thinking, right? So we had to kind of map out the strategy, what we're going to do, how many sites we're going to do, and there's a lot of these variables, and then you overlook a few variables, and then further down the line, you got to fix this, that, and the other. So I pretty much put together this strategy for the goals and what they had in mind. So yeah, worked with them for 6 years, and by the end of it, I was CTO 6 years. So by the fifth year, I was doing everything. We had a small team in place, and so I was in a managerial position, which I really enjoyed. There's awesome people out there, so you just got to treat them with respect. I think that's a lot of managers don't. They throw their weight around this, that, and the other. Whereas if you listen to people, also admit that you don't know everything, right? So a lot of people they just can't seem to bring themselves to go, I don't know that. That's a great tip. Yeah, we'll give it a go, or even just give things a go. So like my one the guys he was amazing coder, right? So good. He just was just perfectionist. He's perfectionist, perfectionist. So I got this idea. Just give him the room. Just give them the runway, because that's who you're. They're the ones adding the value, right? I can't tell that person, oh no, don't do that out of ego. I'm holding the company back, and I think I think a lot of human emotion can get in the way of a goal orientated kind of companies are goal orientated and mechanical, right? So you bring emotion into that, you can be getting in the way. So I think I had to shift my position from coder, working all the time, as in doing this, that, and the other, working through the night. So it was crazy. To right, there's other people around. I got to start listening to other people. I got to keep a check on my ego because this can seriously affect things going forward. And these people are real people. They have their own feelings, this, that, and the other. Listen to them. If they've got value to add, let them add the value. Simple as,
yeah.
you
I
know?
mean, that sounds very impressive on your end, though, just to go from, 5 to 6 years full time from a development lead role all the way up to, C level. It's really impressive stuff, and to have still the humility that you have right now. I don't think I've ever seen other leaders with that kind of mentality to still be
Yeah.
open, to still keep your ego in check. And no, it's this is really interesting. So yeah, I mean, I guess with the people that you work with, I mean, like you said, you have to kind of be mechanical in a way to nurture innovation, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise you won't be able to get things done in a quicker but more efficient way where, you're actually innovating something new that will in the end make something more efficient, right?
Yeah.
That's the end goal with software in general. Um, but I'm curious, like, so as a C level, from a technical point of view to C level, did you then, was it a complete shift or did you still have a say into the technical implementation of, software that has been developed in that company?
Yeah, so I think again, this is where the use case first comes in handy. So I did have a technical, I did have technical control over things.
Oh, right, right.
But then again, saying that, there's obviously you are kind of answering to CEOs and the operating officers and stuff like that. So they have a business goal, and your job is to fulfill the business needs, but also have a keep in mind future events. Keep in mind that technology can change, and maybe you need to kind of future-proof things, make things efficient. So you're kind of bringing forward efficiency, spending time on developing these processes in order to make certain extensions or amendments way easier. And a lot of people might come to the company. A lot of people might. There's a lot of churn. Let's say a dev leaves. It's a startup. It's quite going to be quite a fast environment. As you said, to go from being somebody that's hands-on to at sea level, it's way easier in a startup because they're way smaller. So it's way easier to hop. We're not talking like Oracle now, where you've got to go from the bottom all the way. We're talking a few hops. Um, so yeah, it's all of those things combined. You've got to have this holistic view of the tech stacks. Do you kind of risk vendor lock-in? All these different things. Like you've got to be very careful about the even just down to bundlers and down to packages you use. Just will they be maintained? Do we write our own library or should we use this library? Because it might just drop off the cliff edge. And then that means we have to then implement that library in future. Do we spend the time to do it now? Or should we just use that package to kind of get something out now? And that's where you talk to the CTO, the CEO and the COO, and you come to an agreement, or almost you're like wrestling over we need this to start making money, or and then you're kind of convincing them, look, we've got to do this first, otherwise in future it could lose you money. So there's like this, you're wrestling with these people in a good way though, because you've all got a common goal.
Yeah.
So you want things to work and you want things to make money efficiently. So yeah, it was a journey, but yeah, I was definitely still involved on a technical level because for a startup, I couldn't just be sitting around designing systems and this, that, and the other. I was working on, let's say, a certain module or a certain system. Like I was working on separate systems, like I was building an ad exchange and stuff like that. So at the same time as managing the team, I don't think I'd want it to be any other way because I think I'd still want to be involved. I don't think I could just go full managerial. Um,
Yeah.
I still want to be involved. Also, you can lose. You could probably lose your footing and start kind of declining. You could have a certain cognitive decline if you just opted out of the coding altogether.
Yeah, it's really interesting when it comes to, climbing up the ladder as such. Like you then start to question yourself of what kind of leader you want to be. Do you still want to have the capacity to, implement while at the same time, be good with people and business, right? It's a hard balance to keep, and even in my experience, I've met like someone who's a manager who's very technical and is more on the technical side rather than the managerial side. But then I get the vice versa, where you have someone who's mostly all social, but
Yeah.
like very low technical knowledge. And yeah, it's very hard to keep that balance, really, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, because like if you've got like a non-techie, they'll be like, "Well, can we do that? When's it going to be ready? Tomorrow afternoon?" And he's like, "No." And they go, "Why not?" Because it needs to be this way, that way, and the other. And it usually sometimes it takes longer to explain why you need to do something that way than it is to kind of get the bootstrapping phase all complete and then you're on your way. And yeah, it can be quite frustrating. I can imagine, it's yeah, it's a frustrating process for devs who just want to get on with stuff, do it correctly, and make sure it's maintainable. But then you've got that manager going, "Oh, we need this out tomorrow." I can see how corners are cut easily. It is a hard balance. It definitely is. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, having said all that, let's hear about what you are doing right now. Has anything changed since all of that? Yeah, what are you up to
Yeah,
right now?
yeah. Well, so I just got to the point where I thought, look, I'm just working all hours. To cut a long story short, I completely burned out. I got to the point where I used to hear these things, burn out, burn out, burn out, and I used to go, oh, burn out, what's that all about, Because I'd always be working into the night, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd be like, oh, burnout can't touch me. I'm invincible. That's fine. I can outwork this, that, and the other. But I got to the point where, I think it's more of a kind of multi-dimensional thing. Burnout is a lot of things come from different angles rather than a single process. There's all these processes coming in, and you need you as a resource. And I think that's kind of that's the starting point for burnout. And then once you start adding the hours in, I found myself working from like 8, 9 in the morning on a Tuesday, for example, to 9 at night on the Wednesday.
Oh boy.
I'd have like an hour and a half where I'd have like some food. I just wouldn't sleep. The sun will go down, the sun will come back up, it'd go down and back up. And I'd be like, this is, I'm in my 30s. And I just thought, yeah, I got a goal, but this is nuts. And I got to the point where it started to affect my sleep. Like I wouldn't be able to go to sleep at night. And I'd be like, I might as well get up and do some work. And I just thought, this is crazy. This is crazy. And, it really would affect me. Like at some points I'd be like, is this my life? Is this is all I got in my life? Like I'd spent the last 10 years isolating myself essentially to build up my skill set to work with clients. I didn't really have any social life. And I was like, this is my life, like doing this, and I'm knackered, and I just look like hell. So I just thought, now I got to make a change. I made my money. I'm quite comfortable. Let's go back to grassroots and do what I love doing. Go back to the project, and this is where the Web3 space is amazing. This is where I got into this whole thing because I was interested in crypto back in like ages ago. Ages ago, I've always followed crypto. I've always invested this and the other, and I just thought this is my opportunity. And I just thought let's just take it. I got to just take this opportunity to run with it. So this is where I've got into the Web3 space, as you have.
Indeed, yeah. Right. So actually, you've kind of taken a step back from the whole contracting life, and I guess you're more suited towards just focusing on Web3 things, right? Is that basically it, or?
Yeah. So I thought I'm more agile now as I'm a solo dev again. I kind of like that. I get you have to grow this and the other, but I like being solo. I like my projects. I like tinkering around. I like learning new programming languages. Whereas when I was working in that capacity with all of the managerial obligations, this that, and the other, I found that I was just bogged down and there was no growth, right? So you had that, and you knew you were falling behind, and that just filled you with anxiety as well. Um, So yeah, I just thought I need to get back into this. I need to get back into where I started and use this buffer, this, that, and the other. I'd have no obligations. And I think I was, I always tell people, that they interested this, that, and the other, and they say, I can't, I work, this, that, and the other. I always say, look, people so overlook, they underestimate the power of having time to breathe, to have space in order to be creative, because that's where the value is created. I mean, you could go to work every day and you're creating value for somebody else, but you can backdate everything you earn in future. You're creating, just because you don't get paid at the end of the month doesn't mean you don't get paid 24 months down the line, and it'll all add up. And it's that space where all that magic happens, right? That's where all the fun happens. That's where all the learning, processes happen. And it's so overlooked or underestimated because that's where the real value happens, is when you go from idea to execution. It takes time, and you also need to keep your liabilities and obligations very low. They need to be as low as possible for you to fulfill it. And I'm that's kind of where I'm at now, So I built up my buffer. I don't have any obligations or liabilities. It's an amazing place to be because I can work in this space for the next decade if I want and not even make a dime. But I can do what I want. I can, if I got an idea, I can jump on it. If I want to go to California and with you guys, I can be there, So and it's been amazing. Best decision I ever made was to join that company, but it was also one of the best decisions I ever made to kind of put it to one side and go, right, I'm moving on.
Right. So I guess you're in a much better place now. You mentioned quite a lot, actually, the amount of sacrifice you had to make. There's always a cost to everything. If anything we've learned in software, there's a lot of cost.
A lot of
And
trade, yeah.
yeah, a lot of trade-offs. And I
Mm.
guess in this case, it was, the initial sacrifice of social life, yeah, I guess anything around socials is a sacrifice there. I think I definitely resonate with that as well. With high amounts of, self training and expertise and stuff like that, there's always going to be a trade-off with that time, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, but no, it's good to hear that, you found a footing, you found a balance that's sustainable to you, which is important, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I've had the trade off, I've had the payoff. Now it's right. Let's do something that's completely enjoyable at a realistic pace where you can grow. You can, at the end of the day, things have changed. A lot of things in the tech space have changed since I joined that company, and I think I've got some catching up to do. Basically, I love the Web3 space. I love it. It's just full of opportunities, and I believe that's where I'll probably, the next decade will be spent in Web3.
Cool, that is really interesting. Really excited to see what you come up with in the next few years then. I guess with that comes towards the end of the podcast. But just before we go, Wiley, is there anything you want to share? Anything you want to share? Please feel free. Or if anything, any message you want to give to developers, early developers even, or just in general to, everyday developers, any message to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is that if you have an interest, if you have any kind of curiosity, if you can find the time, get on it, because, there's no syllabus. The amazing thing about this space is there's so many different, like I said, there's so many options. That can be a bad thing sometimes, but, other times you've got the opportunities there. Uh, just get on it. Like if you've got the time to do it, and but you've got a bit of, you're you're hesitating because, that's not something I can do. I'm a back end developer. You'd be very surprised to find out that actually you can do it. If you've got that logic, it's a bit like the skills transfer, right? So if you're a creative person and you've got an eye for something, for example, so let's say you're an artist, you can go into digital art. The skills transfer. Same thing with developers. I see so many kind of cases of, oh, I'm a back end developer, I'm a front end developer. You can be back end heavy. That's fair enough, but it doesn't mean you can't do front end. You'll find that a lot of technologies are now becoming like is much of a synergy. So just if you think you can't do it, you're lying to yourself. Really, you're convincing yourself not to do it. So get on YouTube. It's all there, or on Beamstream.
Or Beamstream, yep. Indeed. Cool. Yeah. So that is Wylie, everyone. Thanks very much for joining the podcast. And I hope everyone's learned something. And, this is just the start of the series. And I'm really, really hyped and glad to have Wylie on as the first of the series. So thanks, everyone. And see you soon.